Hey guys, it's Malthus here once again, and today I want to show you how the Oni-Goroshi Infernal Blow Slayer that I've been playing has come along in the past few days, because he is now level 91, has taken on Elder several times, including in red tier maps, as well as the tier 16 Guardians, Shaper, Ubrutsiri, level 83 Liches, all kinds of shit throughout the game, and it has gone quite swimmingly. Now, the large reason for that is strictly because the weapon is just a really good weapon, and Slayer is a really good class right now. Infernal Blow itself is pretty damn nice and satisfying for actually clearing stuff, especially paired with our built-in melee splash from Impact and our Ancestral Call, which is making quite a lot of melee skills very nice and useful, but it's nothing too special on the single target front. It just barely gets by in some encounters, and that is largely because the weapon is fairly strong and the scaling is fairly strong from the damage that we have through that weapon. So replace it with anything else like a Molten Strike or a Blade Flurry, you're going to do a lot more single target than we currently do on this character, and you will see exactly what my single target looks like in a second. I'm just showing you off what the satisfying clear speed you can kind of get from the Infernal Blow portion with the Ancestral Call. Not even clear speed, just the satisfying actual pops and explosions you get using Infernal Blow, and it is actually very, very usable right now as a skill with the Ancestral Call and with this weapon. So for most boss encounters, I don't even bother taking out Ancestral Call. When I do actually want to do single target, like against these Elder Guardians, then I take out Ancestral Call and put in Ruthless instead, and that gives us a 6-link Infernal Blow, paired with the War Chief that's also dealing something like 400,000 DPS. You have some pretty respectable single target. This is some red tier Guardian action, and they die fairly quickly. The biggest problem is you are, of course, a pure melee skill. You have to run up to the target and actually fist them in the face manually, so that is a little bit annoying, but that's just what a melee skill is. So otherwise, yeah, the damage went really well. It's a bit RNG based off of getting the right crits and the right Ruthless procs, but when it happens, you can see a red tier Elder here doesn't really do much to you at all, because the damage is really quite nice through this weapon. The Infernal Blow hits pretty damn hard. It's not the best single target in the game, but it does still hit very, very hard when you scale it with the right amount of damage, especially through this weapon's damage type of scaling. So we get lots of fizz, we get lots of elemental damage and fire pen and fire damage as well, and it ends up hitting immensely hard. And one of the main perks of this weapon is that it's always going to be a 6-link, so you never have to worry about getting a 6-link, and that does take or ease quite a lot of the cost and the burden of a build off of your actual entire cost. So the weapon, when I bought it, was something like 30-40C. It's already a 6-link. Getting the right colors, 6 reds onto it, is apparently somewhat hard. I didn't have any problem with that. Maybe I just got lucky. But yeah, you just need those 6 reds. I have a 5-link War Chief setup in my chest. Don't really need any other 6 links. So overall, that makes it a nice bit cheaper with not needing a 6-link for your max setup. But it does kind of come into play to need some decent bit of currency if you want the really good jewelry and the really good jewels and all of that. This here is an example of a high level or just level 83 Lich fight. Thought it'd be fun to throw one of these in every now and again. These are substantially harder than just the ones you'd fight if you're level, 75, 70 or so. So the level 83 Lich fights aren't too much of a joke. His health isn't incredible, but he does hit pretty damn hard and has several phases to go through, so you do have to be fairly vigilant as to what's happening there. And then you just go through, kill these spires one at a time. I saved you some effort of looking through that since they do go immune. And I did keep just Ancestral Call for this because I do want to go ahead and attack a lot. And you can see right here with these 2 spires next to each other, a good example of Ancestral Call plus Melee Splash. If you're Ancestral Calling 2 or 3 targets right next to each other, they're each getting hit by the Melee Splash, and that Melee Splash is going to overlap. So in that situation, you do have a lot more damage that way. Otherwise, Ancestral Call should almost always be a DPS downgrade for your single target. So it doesn't function in the same way that a Molten Strike would with the current shift clicking, and I'd be careful of using it on single target, especially when you need actual DPS for your encounters. So here's our first attempt at a Hydra. Yeah, it went pretty well. That was with pure 6-link with Ruthless in our 6-link. for single target. Drop your War Chief every now and again, should get some good damage going, and it's not too bad at all for DPS. Now, this is a Minotaur with 30% life, I believe, so it's a little slower than it otherwise should be. But yeah, it's respectable damage, and Leech and Slayering is pretty good. The biggest problem with something like this is you're going to notice that I'm rarely on full life because I am taking so many hits, so my damage on full life gem often won't be working, and that means I'm running him as a 5-link. But overall, the damage is totally fine. For the most part, we are damage on full life viable if you're just a bit under through Blood Rage or through the burn effect, but you're actually leeching to your maximum, then you will be getting damage on full life potential. If you're actually taking a bunch of damage, that's when you're not getting damage on full life benefits. So keep that in mind. Blood Rage as a Slayer won't actually ruin your damage on full life. Had that quite a lot of times been asked about why I'm doing that when it shouldn't be working. It totally does. It still counts you as 100% life if you've got something like 99% life and you're over leeching. That is basically all of the clips I wanted to show you guys. The guy has more or less destroyed most content. Slayer Cull is feeling very good, and I do want to show you exactly what I did for the character up to this point. So as I have mentioned in the previous video, this character is very much open to interpretation. You can just use it as a template for the most part and change it based on what skill you want to play. I personally really felt like doing some Infernal Blow action this time around, so that's where I lent entirely to Infernal Blow. Not because it's good, not because it's better than anything else, because I want to play Infernal Blow. And like I said, I think most sword skills should be able to work. Your Blade Flurries, your Molten Strikes, your Spectral Throws, your, well shit, Lightning Strikes, Lacerates, Reaves, whatever. It just depends on the strength of the skill and how much fun you have playing with the skill, because it is just basically a top tier weapon that will have good enough damage to make any of those skills shine. It's physical based to begin with, and then gives you a bunch of extra fire damage, and it doesn't really matter what your beginning damage type is. Even let's say something like Lightning Strike, you still start off with all of your fizz. Some of your fizz gets converted to lightning. All of the extra fire gets based off of your original fizz, so it doesn't really matter. It just matters how much you then penetrate your lightning and fire at the same time, and it does get a bit more interesting in how you actually plan your passive tree. For example, a Molten Strike will want your point blank nodes. If you're doing a Frostblade, you're probably going to want maybe some Fangs of Frost as well as some Lava Lash. Who the fuck knows? Basically, this is my Infernal Blow tree, and it can be loosely used for a bunch of other skills. But the weapon does carry you right from level 1 up to whatever level you choose to use it at, as it gets a bit of extra physical damage every single level, so it scales all by itself. At this point, I'm level 91, and my tooltip just sitting around in town is 119,000. That is pure 6-linked action, whereas usually when I have Ancestral Call on, I have 104,000 tooltip. Now, it is very tooltip heavy, so once you have your buffs up and all the right stuff, I can hit something like 600,000 or 700,000 DPS on the tooltip. So it does show a lot of its damage in the tooltip, specifically as an Infernal Blow character. But overall, my actual Shaper DPS in best case scenario is currently 1 million. Now that is with the Shaper ticked over here. That is with Infernal Blow ticked with our 6-link over here. Not quite perfect gems and all that. But yeah, 6-link damage, 1 million. And then with Ancestral War Chief, I have about 360k, and that's on a 5-link. So if you give him a 6th link, or even a better, let's say 5th link over here, you can get more damage. Or 6th link, you chuck in probably Ellie Focus, so he's rocking about 600k against Shaper as well. And that means that you can really rely a lot more on a shitty single target like Infernal Blow, because War Chief does quite a lot of damage for you. That is, of course, a 6th link there, which I don't currently have. And if you're going to use something like an Ellie Focus to get more damage, do bear in mind you can't really do it in your main skill, because you have to actually crit things to ignite them to get her blessing buff. So if you use Ellie Focus, yes, it says a bunch of damage, but you won't actually be igniting anything, and thus getting the buff, which is something like another 100% of your damage. So keep that in mind. I covered most other things in the previous video, but a nice helm enchant here, 40% Infernal Blow damage, does go a long way. Star Conjure is a pretty good choice for a helm, by no means completely necessary. If I could go back, I probably just get a pure resist helm, because balancing my resist has been kind of a nightmare, and I have been playing with, excuse me, just a little bit undercapped on cold and lightning, because I do have Wise Oak up most of the time, so it's not a big issue, but it does get you in trouble a bit. So they're just a little bit uncapped, and Star Conjure paired with everything else has made it just a little bit harder to get those full resists. Otherwise, yeah, hey, if you really want to go all out on damage, Abyssus can definitely factor in here as well, and that increases our damage by 50%. So then if you try and just scale back a bit of your damage elsewhere, it probably is worthwhile, and try and get a bit more life. Besides that, I did really try and get some accuracy on my rings, because it seemed to be pretty important to up my accuracy at the time. I was fairly low. At this point with my golem, I'm at 93%, and that's because I have accuracy on one ring and the other ring. So 2 good accuracy rolls gets us a lot of extra accuracy, because we do have a bunch on the tree, percent accuracy. So it's pretty important. Try and get at least 1 roll. And then besides that, you really want flat fizz. So flat fizz over here, flat fizz over here, flat fizz over here, and then crit multi. And besides that, we do also go for flat fizz on our jewels. So I'm running these gloves with 2 murderous eye jewels that both have flat fizz, flat fizz. These have fire, so it's infinitely worse to have flat fire than flat fizz, but they do have good life, and it is still a bit of damage, and they're a lot cheaper to go for fire than flat fizz. And other than that, in my tree I have actual jewels, not abyssal jewels, and that is because crit multi is very important for us. You don't get that much on the tree, you get some here and some here and here basically, and then a bit on your amulet. So that leaves you with something like 300 crit multi. Ideally, you're looking for at least 400 multi on your melee skill. So we've got 470 over here, and a lot of that is because of jewels. So try and get crit multi on your jewels, and maybe some physical, maybe some attack speed. For the most part, you are looking for crit multi, and it is worth a lot more than the abyssal jewels are. So keep that in mind. You should be going for crit multi here, and it is a lot of your damage. So if you don't have good jewels, then your damage may in fact be pretty flaccid compared to mine. So keep that in mind. But ultimately, if you really want actual damage, you probably don't want to use Infernal Blow, because it is just a little bit worse than things like a Blade Flurry. Or if you really want to go hard, you can do this entire setup as it is, and then have a weapon swap with another Oni-Goroshi with a Blade Flurry setup. That would be pretty simple. It doesn't cost very much right now, and it should just enhance your single target experience by a good chunk. And then the last few things to wrap up, I am using Hatred as a aura for a bunch of extra damage, Herald of Ash as a herald for a bunch of extra damage. Hatred seems to be a lot better than Anger for me, so that's why I'm using it. If for some reason Anger is better for you, use that. There are a few Elder Jewels that can factor in to your build that could help you with your Anger. So, you know, if you want to use one of those, then Anger should definitely be better. And besides that, just a bunch of resists on your boots. That's what I tried to do, crafted these myself. Not too much else I don't think I really have to mention. Vile Haste with increased duration, using an Ice Golem because you do need that. Blood Rage, I'm keeping that up almost 100% of the time, gives you good attack speed, a little bit of Leech, and of course Frenzy Generation. And lastly, I did replace my Quicksilver with a Lion's Roar just for single target and just for pure DPS, but I map entirely with the Quicksilver almost always because it feels a lot better to have the Quicksilver to be able to close the gaps every now and again and then just slap things instead of being pure Whirling or Leap Slam. So do keep that in mind. I don't recommend using Lion's Roar all the time, and even in some of those bosses, it is extremely uncomfortable to knock things back over and over again. So it's a huge amount of damage increase on single target, but I don't really recommend using it all of the time. And lastly, I will mention that when I leveled this character, I did take Endless Hunger first, so I could deal with the debuff a bit easier. So I went there first, then Impact, then Brutal Fervor, then Bane of Legends. I got the Leech pretty early on, and I went into the left-hand side of the tree as my first sort of direction, and that's probably all you really need to know. Try and cap your fire resist as you level, and it should be a pretty smooth experience as a Slayer because I don't feel the debuff whatsoever. Slayer takes care of that all for me quite easily. That's about all I've got to say for the character, guys. It was very fun. The sword is pretty maybe even OP, but pretty damn strong, so get onto that if you can. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed the build, hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time.